My sister stole my apartment key and rearranged my entire life, then called it helping. When I came home and found my journal on the kitchen table, open to a page she'd highlighted, I knew it was time to. I'd been living in the same apartment in Astoria, Queens for almost 7 years. 1 bedroom, 3rd floor walk-up, cozy, not fancy, but every mine. I moved here after my divorce, when I had nothing but my work laptop, a mattress, and a few clothes. Samir, my ex-husband, and I split after 13 years of emotional fatigue, the kind where you don't even fight anymore. You just go quiet. After the divorce, I worked hard to build a life that made me feel safe. I went to therapy. I started journaling. I created a space that felt like me, even when everything else in my life felt like it had been decided by other people. I live alone. By choice. I like order. I have my quirks, I alphabetize my spices, I write in a leather journal every night. I don't like people touching my things unless I've invited them to. That's not a trauma response. That's just who I am. Now to Mireille, my younger sister. She's 3 years younger, lives in Ithaca, upstate New York, and is what you might call alternative. She teaches yoga, has a YouTube channel where she talks about emotional frequencies, and lives in a so-called healing cabin, which is basically a 2-room shed she and her partner built from a reclaimed barn. She drinks mushroom tea. She believes in spirit cleansing. She doesn't believe in banks. We've never been close in adulthood, but we're not estranged either. We text on birthdays. See each other on holidays. Last Christmas was the first time I'd seen her in person in almost 2 years. It was fine. She was floaty and weird, and I was tired and polite. We're used to each other's differences by now. But in January, she reached out. Said she was coming to the city for a women's alignment retreat in Williamsburg and asked if she could crash at my place for a few nights. I hesitated. But I said yes. Family, right? She stayed with me for 3 nights. During those 3 nights, she commented on everything, from the stale energy in my bedroom to how my bookshelf was intellectually rigid. She moved my couch pillows to facilitate better energy flow, lit incense without asking, and tried to convince me to throw out my microwave. I gritted my teeth and waited for her to leave. She did. And I exhaled. I also made a mental note to not do this again. Fast forward 2 weeks. I came home from work one Tuesday and something felt off. The light was on in the hallway, even though I always turn it off before leaving. The air smelled like lavender and something else, maybe sage? I walked into the living room and just froze. My entire apartment had been rearranged. Not a little. Not subtly. The bookshelf had been reorganized by color, not genre. My spice rack had been replaced with small labeled jars that weren't mine. All of the plants had been moved to the windowsill in the kitchen. My bed had been stripped and redone with new sheets, cream linen ones I didn't own. There was a meditation cushion in the middle of the living room floor. The framed photos of me and my college friends were gone, replaced by affirmation cards. At first I honestly thought I'd been robbed by the most passive-aggressive intruder in New York City. But nothing was stolen. It was just rearranged. Like someone had decided to fix my home without permission. And then I noticed the biggest thing, the small terracotta pot by my door, the one with the fake succulent where I kept a backup key for emergencies, was empty. I checked every corner of my apartment. I was shaking. I checked the fridge. My condiments were labeled. She'd labeled my mustard. Then I found the Palo Santo stick, bundled neatly with twine and a small card taped to it. The card read, "To welcome clarity and fresh beginnings. You're welcome. M." I sat down on my floor and stared at it for maybe 5 minutes before I even reached for my phone. I texted her. "Did you come into my apartment?" She replied, "I felt like you needed support. You seemed so disconnected when I visited. I had a key, and I was just trying to help shift the energy." I didn't even know how to respond. She hadn't asked. She hadn't even told me. She broke into my apartment, touched everything I owned, and decided her idea of comfort was more valid than mine. I told her to mail the key back immediately and to never, ever come into my space uninvited again. She sent the key a few days later, along with a note that read, "Love isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it's brave." No apology. No acknowledgement that what she did was invasive or wrong. Just another vague pseudo-spiritual justification. I tried to put it behind me. I really did. But then, 2 weeks later, I came home from work and something was different again. This time, the door was locked, nothing looked touched, but on my kitchen table was my journal. My journal that I kept locked in a box inside my bedroom closet. It was lying open. A page had been highlighted. Orange marker. Like a message. The section she highlighted read, "Sometimes I feel like I'm only loved when I'm being managed or improved. Like people can't love me unless they're fixing me. It makes me feel invisible." That entry was from 6 months ago. After a particularly rough therapy session. And now it was lying on my kitchen table like someone had dissected me and left the pieces out for review. My breath caught in my throat. I actually dropped my bag and stumbled back from the table. I checked everything. Nothing else was moved. The lock on the journal box had been picked. The windows were still shut. I sat down, tried to calm my heart, and called her. She answered with, "Hi, love. Did you get my note?" I asked her, very directly, if she had entered my apartment again. She said yes, casually, like it was no big deal. "I felt like the energy was still off," she said. "And I had a spare copy of the key I forgot to return. I just wanted to help you open up a little. That page in your journal really spoke to me. I think you need to confront that." She had read my private journal. She had highlighted a vulnerable moment and left it like some kind of therapy assignment. I lost it. I shouted at her. I told her she was unstable, manipulative, and invasive. She responded calmly, too calmly, that I was resisting growth and stuck in trauma loops. I hung up on her. And I cried. Then I locked everything. I turned off my phone. I didn't sleep that night. I kept hearing the echo of her voice in my head. "You're resisting growth." The next morning, I woke up with my jaw aching from clenching all night. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the closet, at the box I kept my journal in, like it was something radioactive. I didn't go to work. I emailed my supervisor and took a personal day. Then I spent 3 hours changing all the locks, including the deadbolt. I ordered a camera for the hallway. Not some cheap motion sensor thing, a real one, with cloud backup. Later that afternoon, I went downstairs and spoke with my landlord, Mr. Reza. I asked him, quietly and politely, if he had let anyone into my unit. He was confused. "No, why? Someone break in?" I gave him a vague version of the truth. "My sister came by without permission. I think she still had an old copy of the key." He frowned, the way older men do when they smell drama but don't want to be pulled into it. "Call the police," he said. "If she has a key, you tell them. I don't want trouble in the building." That night, I couldn't sit still. I kept pacing. Kept rereading the journal page she had highlighted. She'd chosen that passage on purpose. She wanted me to feel seen, maybe. Or exposed. Or like she had power over me. I opened my phone and started compiling everything, screenshots of our texts, photos of the journal, timestamps from my building's security system. Thankfully, the camera by the lobby door caught her buzz in a few days prior. I didn't even know what I wanted to do with it. I thought about calling Mary again, but I knew how it would go. She'd twist the narrative. She always had. Even when we were kids. When she stole my diary in 10th grade and read it out loud to her friends, she swore I wanted people to know those things. It hit me like a cold wave. This wasn't new. This was just the grown-up version of it. Still violating my privacy. Still calling it connection. Still pretending her curiosity was compassion. What changed now was that I was done playing along. The next day, I filed a police report. The officer I spoke to, Detective Schuler, was calm and methodical. I explained the situation, the break-ins, the journal, the highlighted text. I told him about the duplicate key, the fact that she admitted to entering uninvited. I showed him the texts. He asked if anything had been stolen. "No. Nothing. It's not theft. I paused, trying to find the word. Intrusion. Psychological. Emotional." He nodded like he'd heard that before. He wrote everything down. Took the photos. Asked if I wanted to press charges. I said I didn't know. Then he asked if I wanted a restraining order. And suddenly, that felt right. I didn't tell my mother right away. She's 71 and recently moved into an assisted living facility in Beacon. She gets overwhelmed easily these days. She still sees Mireille as the sensitive one, the daughter with a spiritual gift who just sees the world differently. When I finally did tell her, over the phone, I tried to be calm. Her first words were, "But honey, she's your sister." I think that hurt more than anything. I explained what happened. I read the highlighted journal passage out loud to her. I told her Mireille had broken into my home, not once, but twice. That she'd violated my privacy, mocked my space, and called it love. There was a pause. And then, quietly, Mom said, "I think she just doesn't know how to express care in normal ways." That sentence stuck with me. In normal ways. What does that even mean? It made me think of all the times growing up when Mireille's chaos was dressed up as creativity. Her tantrums are passionate. Her boundary crossing was innocent. I used to internalize it. I used to think I was the problem for being too rigid, too sensitive, too unyielding. Now I see it for what it is. That same week, the restraining order was granted. Temporary at first. It restricted her from entering my building, my workplace, or contacting me directly. I didn't hear anything from her for 4 days. Then, on a Friday, she showed up at my job. My coworker Nathan texted me from the lobby, "There's a woman here saying she's your sister. Do you want me to let her up?" I practically ran down the stairs. There she was, standing in the building foyer like she had every right to be there. Wearing flowy linen pants, a knitted scarf that probably cost $300, and a big woven bag over her shoulder. She smiled when she saw me. "I came because I think we need to talk." I was shaking. "You're not supposed to be here." "I don't accept that boundary," she said calmly. "I think it's fear-based." I turned to the front desk and told them to call security. Even as she was being escorted out, she kept her tone light. Like I was the one being unreasonable. "You're stuck in old narratives," she called out, as she walked backward toward the door. "I'm trying to help you evolve." The receptionist looked at me and said, "Is she, like, okay?" I didn't answer. I just went back upstairs and locked myself in the supply room for 10 minutes. She left a package at the front desk. I didn't even open it. I took it straight to the trash. The receptionist told me later it was a hand-bound journal titled A Sister's Love, Unfiltered Truth. Inside, it had chapters based on our childhood memories, and a long letter blaming me for weaponizing the carceral state. I blocked her number. I blocked her email. I blocked her from every platform I could think of. And yet, the next day, she emailed my therapist. Yes. My therapist. She'd gone through my IG stories, found a tagged mental health post, and looked up the practice I attend. Then she emailed them, requesting a sibling healing session. Thankfully, my therapist handled it with utmost professionalism. She didn't respond to Mireille. But she did bring it up with me during our next session. "That's not spiritual," my therapist said. "That's coercive." For the first time in weeks, I felt validated. It's been about 6 weeks since then. No more emails. No more appearances. The order is now permanent for the next 2 years. She lives upstate, and I'm fairly sure someone in her circle finally talked some sense into her. Or maybe she's just finding a new energy project to fix. But the thing is, what she broke can't be undone. Even now, I check my locks every time I leave. I triple-check my privacy settings. I don't journal anymore. Not the way I used to. I am typing now. And I password protect it. Because I no longer assume my privacy is sacred. Not even with family. Especially not with family. A couple of weeks after the final email attempt, and after my therapist gently encouraged me to stay aware but not hypervigilant, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time: stillness. Not peace, not yet. But a kind of emotional stillness, like my nervous system had finally started to trust that I wasn't about to be ambushed. Then my mom called. It was a Tuesday night, and I was making lentil soup, half distracted by a podcast. I saw her name pop up and had that familiar mix of dread and guilt that comes with adult children trying to maintain complicated parental ties. She started the conversation cheerfully, almost too cheerfully. "I talked to Mireille," she said, just 10 seconds in. She sounded tender. Raw. But sincere. I put the spoon down. "Mom, please don't. She's your sister. She's unstable. She's hurting," my mom insisted. "She said you turned the whole system against her. That you made her feel like a criminal. She broke into my apartment, Mom. Twice. She read my journal. She violated me." There was silence. Then, the sigh. "That was a mistake," my mother said. "But she was trying to connect. You've always kept her at arm's length." There it was again, the implication that my boundaries were to blame. That Mary's intrusions were simply reactions to my coldness. That I'd somehow asked for it. "I don't want to talk about this anymore," I said, and hung up. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just turned the burner off and sat in the dark for 20 minutes. Later that night, I found myself rereading old emails, ones I had saved from years ago when Mary and I were in better, if shallow, contact. I found one she sent me on my birthday, maybe 5 years back. It read, "I hope this year brings you back to yourself. I hope you finally let yourself be loved in the ways that matter, not just the ones you can control." At the time, I thought it was poetic. Now, it feels like a warning I didn't understand yet. The next part of this story might be hard to explain without sounding dramatic. In early May, I drove upstate to Beacon to visit my mom. We hadn't seen each other since the winter. I needed to see her in person, not to hash things out, but just to be in the same room and gauge where we stood. I bought groceries, made her lunch, and did some chores around her apartment. She seemed tired. Older. We didn't mention Mary for most of the visit, and I thought maybe we'd both silently agreed to let it rest. But right before I left, she handed me a manila envelope. "She wanted me to give this to you." My heart dropped. I didn't touch it. "She doesn't know where you live," my mom said quickly. I didn't tell her anything. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I think she's trying. And because maybe one day, when you're ready, I don't want it." I left the envelope on the table and walked out. I don't remember the drive back home. I only remember the feeling of pressure behind my eyes, like a migraine that never fully arrives. Later that month, I got a call from a man named Julian. He introduced himself as an old friend of Mary's. Apparently, they'd gone through yoga training together in 2017. He was respectful, apologetic, and sounded genuinely concerned. "She's been spiraling," he said. "Cut off from a lot of people. She keeps talking about this betrayal that she can't heal from." I listened in silence. "She asked me to reach out. I don't agree with what she did. But I think she's starting to crash emotionally, and she doesn't have a lot of people left." "Why call me?" I asked. "Because she thinks the only way she can heal is if you witness her intention." Those were her words. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly her. This idea that her healing required my participation. That I was the final mirror she needed to confront. "I can't be that for her," I said. He paused. "I figured," he said. "But I had to try." I thanked him for his honesty. Then I hung up. That night, I wrote in a new journal, the password-protected one. I wrote about guilt. About how Mary always positioned herself as the person who felt too much, while I was the one who felt too little. But I've always felt everything. I just don't perform it. I don't make my wounds the responsibility of other people's responsibility. That was the core difference. The heart of everything. Then came June. And with it, the notice. The house we grew up in, the one in Danbury, Connecticut, was finally going to be sold. It had been sitting empty for a year. Our mother hadn't lived there in ages, and the upkeep was no longer feasible. The real estate agent asked if either of us wanted to go through it before the closing date. I said no immediately. Then 2 days later, I changed my mind. I don't even know why. Closure, maybe. Curiosity. Or a masochistic need to walk through the old rooms one last time. I drove up alone. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell anyone. The house looked the same. Slightly overgrown, but still standing proud on its hill. White shutters. Peeling paint. The front door stuck the same way it always did in summer. Inside, it smelled like wood and dust. I walked through each room, touching the walls as if they were some kind of memory map. The kitchen still had the dent in the fridge from when Mary threw a phone at it in 1999. The bedroom we once shared had the faded sunflower wallpaper I used to stare at for hours. I went into the attic and found an old box labeled J&M, letters. Inside were folded notes we used to pass in school. Some were sweet. Some were cruel. One was a letter Mary wrote me after our dad left, saying, "Don't go cold like Mom. Please don't." I stayed there until sunset. I didn't know Mary had been there too, just a week earlier, until the realtor mentioned it in a follow-up email. "Your sister left a small envelope for you in the desk drawer," she wrote. She said it was personal. I hadn't seen it. I didn't look for it. And I wasn't going back. But the idea of that envelope sat in my brain like a splinter. Was it another journal? Was it another apology disguised as enlightenment? Or was it something else entirely? A few days after the realtor's email, I received another package, this time forwarded from the listing office in Danbury. It was postmarked from Ithaca, addressed to me by name in my sister's delicate, looping handwriting. For 3 days, I left it sitting unopened on my dining table. I walked past it like a stranger might pass a locked door they're too afraid to open. Part of me didn't want to know. But another part, the part that always seeks closure, wanted to be done with this chapter in full. So I opened it. Inside was a manila folder labeled Reflections and Repair. Of course. A title. A brand, almost. Miri had always needed everything to be some kind of capitalized moment. There were 5 pages handwritten on parchment-style paper. She wrote about how her intentions had never been rooted in harm, how she believed her actions were a spiritual intervention, and how I had called in this confrontation by burying myself in walls. She never once apologized. Not really. She said she was sorry I felt wounded. Sorry I had interpreted her presence as threatening. But she never acknowledged the harm itself. Then came the final paragraph, one that still sticks in my brain. "I only wanted you to see that you were living inside a self-constructed prison. I entered as a liberator. If my methods upset you, perhaps it's because I touched something you weren't ready to face." That was it. That was her truth. She'd built a whole mythology around my boundaries being the real villain. My privacy, my preferences, my solitude, they were obstacles to her vision of who I should be. It wasn't a peace offering. It was a eulogy for her version of our relationship. One where I played the sick sister, and she got to be the healer. The savior. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty anymore. I felt done. Now, here's where the story shifts. Not into some dramatic confrontation or public shaming. That's not who I am. But I wanted to make something clear, to her, and maybe more importantly, to myself. So I planned something quietly, methodically. Like I always do. Over the next 3 weeks, I compiled everything. Every text, every photo, every piece of handwriting. I took careful screenshots. I redacted nothing. Then I wrote my own version of events, plain, chronological, detailed. I published it as a long-form essay titled, "When Boundaries Become Battlegrounds, a Case Study in Emotional Trespassing." I didn't name her. But anyone who knew us would know. I submitted it to several online magazines that publish personal narratives around family estrangement, emotional abuse, and boundary setting. One of them picked it up. A popular one. The piece went semi-viral. Thousands of shares. Hundreds of comments. People wrote things like, "This feels like my sister. I wish I had the courage to name the harm when it wears a healer's mask. You're not alone. Thank you for this." And here's the thing about writing your truth, it becomes a mirror. Not for you. For the people who tried to distort your reflection for their own comfort. 3 days after the piece went live, Miri emailed me. "So now you've turned your pain into performance." I see. I didn't respond. A week later, she tried again. "You weaponized your narrative. You've created a version of me the world can judge while you play victim. That's not growth." Still, I didn't respond. Because silence, sometimes, is the most satisfying revenge. Silence says, "You don't get access to me anymore." Silence says, "Your interpretation of me no longer controls the outcome." And maybe the deepest cut for someone like Miri, someone who needs to be seen to feel valid, is to be left unseen. A few months passed. Then, out of nowhere, a message arrived from a mutual acquaintance from Ithaca. A woman named Paulina who used to co-host wellness retreats with Miri. She wrote, just wanted to say, your piece changed how I look at consent and spiritual help. I cut ties with her. A few of us did. It was long overdue. I wish you peace. I stared at the screen for a long time. I hadn't set out to ruin her. I hadn't doubted her name, hadn't tried to destroy her life. But in telling the truth, my truth, the ecosystem that enabled her had been disrupted. She could no longer use me as a prop in her healer narrative. She could no longer call her violation of love. And that, to me, is justice. These days, I sleep with both eyes closed again. My journal. On paper. And I don't lock it up. Because the trust one lost wasn't in the world, it was in the idea that I had to protect myself from people who called themselves family. Now I know better. I no longer believe that love requires sacrifice. I no longer confuse help with control. And I no longer keep a spare key outside my door. Not for anyone.